Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are going on a seriously fascinating journey, jumping straight into the microscopic biology of a tired human brain. We're going to map out the precise neural short circuits that happen the minute we miss our rest, and then we'll pan all the way out to the macroscopic reality of how that microscopic chaos translates into actual clinical sleep and psychiatric disorders. So if you've ever wondered why skipping a night of sleep makes you feel completely out of control, well, you're about to see the exact biological blueprint of why that happens. Okay, let's dive into this with a perfect summary from Matthew Walker, the director of UC Berkeley's Sleep and Neuroimaging Laboratory. He said, "Emotionally, you're not on a level playing field." And that hits the nail on the head. We aren't just talking about feeling a little groggy here. We're talking about a fundamental biological handicap in how your brain processes the world.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the sleep-deprived brain, look at disrupted emotional equilibrium, move into mood disorders, cover the major sleep-wake disorders, and wrap up with how to practically assess your own sleep health.
Section 1. The sleep-deprived brain. The biology of exhaustion.
In a rested brain, your prefrontal cortex is basically the CEO. It commands logical reasoning, and it actively calms down your amygdala, which, if you remember, is essentially your brain's alarm system. So if you see a scary movie, the prefrontal cortex tells the amygdala, hey, relax, it's just a movie. But in a sleep-deprived brain, that connection to the logical CEO is completely severed. Instead, the brain reverts to these highly primitive survival patterns, connecting the amygdala directly to the locus coeruleus. Now, this is one of the oldest parts of the brain, and it just dumps a volatile mix of noradrenaline into your system to fight off imminent threats. Without sleep, your logical command center shuts down, and your brain effectively turns into emotional JELL-O, running entirely on fight-or-flight overdrive.
Section 2. Disrupted emotional equilibrium. The vicious cycle.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what neuroimaging studies, using fMRI and EEG tech, see happening in a sleep-starved brain. It's called emotional dysregulation. Because that delicate balance between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex is broken, you get hit with this devastating double whammy. Your emotional response to negative stimuli is massively amplified, and at the exact same time, your capacity to control that emotion is severely reduced.
The domino effect here is just intense. You get heightened amygdala hyperactivity. You've got elevated levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, just flooding the system of chronically sleep-deprived people. Your impulse control plummets. But honestly, the most fascinating point here is about REM sleep. During rapid eye movement sleep, your brain is supposed to consolidate and integrate emotional experiences, right? It helps you resolve them. But when you skip that sleep, you drag those unresolved negative emotional states right into the next day. This creates a brutal, vicious cycle where emotional distress further disrupts your sleep, which then triggers even more long-term emotional dysregulation.
Section 3. Mood disorders and sleep. The psychiatric link.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the phenomenal, almost paradoxical dual effect that sleep deprivation has on profound mood disorders. On one hand, clinical research actually shows that sleep deprivation can be used as a transient, meaning temporary way, to ameliorate or improve symptoms of major depressive disorder. But look at the flip side. That exact same lack of sleep is known to induce mania, establishing a powerful, very real link to bipolar disorder. It just goes to show how deeply our sleep-wake cycle is entangled with our overall psychiatric stability.
Furthermore, sleep disorders rarely travel alone. They bring along some severe comorbidities, like depression, anxiety, and noticeable cognitive changes. But crucially, and this is a highly serious detail, nightmares actually increase the risk for suicidal thoughts and behavior even when adjusting for depression. This really underscores why clinicians view sleep disorders not just as secondary symptoms, but as critical early warning signs of an impending mental illness episode. Intervening early with someone's sleep can literally be life-saving.
Section 4. Major sleep-wake disorders. The clinical reality.
To put this into perspective, the clinical data is staggering. Look at the sheer prevalence of these disorders in the general population. Insomnia symptoms that meet diagnostic criteria affect up to 22% of adults. Obstructive sleep apnea? That affects up to 30% of males. But check out hypersomnolence, which is excessive sleepiness. That affects anywhere from 5% to a massive 33% of Americans. Think about that. Up to a third of the population is struggling to stay awake during the day, despite actually sleeping. These aren't edge cases. They're incredibly common clinical realities.
So, the crucial point is understanding what separates a rough week from a true clinical diagnosis. The DSM-5-TR criteria require that the sleep disturbance causes clinically significant distress or impairment in your daily functioning. It can't just be explained away by the effects of a substance, like, say, drinking way too much caffeine or using a drug. And while it can coexist with other mental disorders, those disorders alone cannot adequately explain the insomnia. It has to be a distinct, impactful condition.
Contrast that with hypersomnolence. This isn't about being unable to sleep, it's about your sleep entirely failing to do its job. The diagnostic criteria here involve a main sleep period lasting at least 7 hours, but often it involves prolonged episodes of more than 9 hours a day that are completely non-restorative. These folks wake up and just do not feel refreshed. They struggle heavily with sleep inertia, meaning they have profound difficulty becoming fully awake after an abrupt awakening. And again, just like insomnia, it must cause significant distress and impairment.
Section 5. Assessing your sleep health. Clinical evaluation.
Let's move to how clinicians practically measure your sleep health and see how this builds a picture of your night. They look at 4 key metrics. 1. Sleep latency. Basically, how long are you staring at the ceiling before you actually drop off? 2. Wake after sleep onset. Once you fall asleep, how long do you manage to stay asleep? 3. Number of awakenings. How fragmented is your rest? And 4, perhaps the most critical one, sleep efficiency. This is the simple ratio of the actual time you spend asleep versus the total time you spend lying in bed. I invite you to mentally evaluate your own sleep efficiency over this past week. Are you actually resting, or are you just resting your eyes?
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Knowing everything we now know about the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and that volatile mix of noradrenaline, turning our brains into emotional JELL-O, how well does your emotional equilibrium really hold up when your sleep efficiency drops? Sleep is absolutely not just a luxury. It is the foundational bedrock of your neurological and psychiatric health. Because without it, the CEO leaves the building, and the alarm bells start ringing. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to take a closer look at your own sleep habits tonight.